Hi, so I've never done welding before, and I don't know why. It's just been one of those things I've never got around to doing. But obviously, we want to do this degasifier unit. I have a plan for doing a quad bike, all kinds of stuff. And welding, or being able to weld, would open up a whole world of possibilities in fabrication for me that I basically want to get into now. And it's kind of held me back, really, when looking at those sorts of things. But I mean, I've been telling everybody you shouldn't be afraid of stuff and you should give stuff a go. And to be honest, that's exactly what I think. So I have the confidence of the ignorant. I've got no idea what I'm doing and think I can do anything. So it's encouraging me to give it a go. And this is what I think about things. I think it's really important just to give stuff a go. Now, it is important to learn. Very true. It's important to have some idea about what it is you're doing. Very true. But you can go too far with that. When you go too far with that, what you end up doing is just trying to find out all the information before you begin it. And to be honest, welding has a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff to learn. It really is an intricate and valuable skill that can take years to master. But it can take days to actually do it, if what you do is just jump in there and give it a go. Now, of course, I've looked at a load of videos on YouTube. I've taken some advice from welding friends of mine, and I've mulled it over for a few weeks before jumping in there. And the first thing I actually went and did was buy a welding machine, and this is it. It's an X-Cort MMA 300E. I'm not being paid to promote this. I just went and bought this because it was 145 quid. Seemed to do what I wanted to do. Now, one of my friends was saying, this Mike actually, the guy who did the plate for us, was saying you've got to have something that's going to give some real amps to it, particularly if you're doing thick plate, because you really want to get some heat in there. So I chose one that'll go up to 300 amps. Now, a lot of the time, of course, what you want to do is weld thin stuff. And oddly enough, the thicker the steel, the easier it's going to be to weld it. Thin steel with arc welding is a nightmare. And I can attest to that having tried it. It is, and there's a bit here I'm going to show you later of thin steel that I've been welding. Now, a lot of the training videos that you watch seem to concentrate on things like the number of amps that you're going to be setting it at, the kind of rods, the actual skill, what kind of positions you need to hold everything, and all that sort of stuff. And all of that is really, really valuable information that you can get later. For me, the information I think I would have appreciated is the stuff that you need to know the very first time you pick up that rod and that you're scared of it. Because I'm scared of it. There's a massive amount of amps, there's heat enough there to melt the metal, and you're supposed to wear a mask so you don't burn your eyeballs out your eye sockets. It's scary, and I was scared of it. So what do you do on those first times you try it, and what experiences have I had I thought was well worth sharing? Now, obviously, I went for a nice enough welder. Not a lot of money. 145 quid is not a lot of money. And I bought this thing. This thing was 25 quid. It's a self-darkening helmet. It's a Chinese thing, actually. And when I put this on, I can see through it. When I strike the arc, it darkens to the level that you need it. Now, this came with a free mask, which was a completely dark bit of glass. And I did give it a go. I held it in front of my face and couldn't see anything. So I couldn't see what I was doing. I couldn't actually see where I needed to poke the rod. And that was a real drawback, actually. With something that self-darkens like this, you can see everything before you start your arc. And when you strike your arc, it darkens and you can still see. So having a decent mask that will self-darken, I think, is really essential. These already dark masks are just a nightmare to try to get to use when you're not used to this sort of stuff. So decent mask, 25 quid. So we're talking about 170 quid spent on that. And then I got myself a set of welder's gloves. Now, I've been using these a little bit, and actually they're pretty awesome, and they cost me a fiver. So 175 quid has set me up to give it a go welding with the equipment that I need. The other thing that I need, actually, is experience of doing it. And like I say, yes, I have read the stuff, and it is very useful. But one thing happens when you do this, and I'll show you in a minute, actually. You put your welding rod in, and you put it on your piece of metal, and nothing happens. I mean, literally nothing. And like I say, I'll turn this on and show you. But you worry about it. You think, hang on a sec, am I doing this right? Because it just does nothing at all. And then, of course, you start to worry. You start to think you're doing things wrong, and you think it's beyond you. Turns out, It's just the flux on the end. When the flux on the end, it doesn't make an electrical contact, so no arc will actually form. So what I've started doing, and I don't know if this is the right thing to do, it's what I've started doing, is I've got a bit of scrap metal leaning against the thing so there's an electrical contact, and I just strike it like you strike a match on the scrap metal until it begins to arc, and then we get the end a little bit hot, and when it's like that, actually you can then weld with the thing. But let me show you what I mean about that. Okay, so it's all turned on and ready to go, and incidentally I've been practicing my welder's head flick. You know the thing where they give it a nod and the face mask drops down? Like that. Like that. If anything, I want to at least look like a welder. So let me show you what I mean about that striking the arc. See? Absolutely nothing. And of course your first reaction is, am I doing something wrong? So you give it a couple of rubs and it will start to strike. When it strikes, that end gets hot. So what I've been doing is striking it, giving a little go so the end gets hot, and then I can actually weld with it. And I'll show you what I mean. It just became so much easier when I did that to actually get a weld out of the thing. Now I did something else there as well actually. You'll notice I grabbed the end, because this is a long flexible rod. It's actually quite difficult to get it to work by waving around a little bit because you've got lots of error, but I was holding on to it there when I did that. Now obviously this is 70 amps, so there's 70 amps going through there. So the other thing that you don't need to be afraid of, that I was afraid of initially, was just holding the rod. It does get a little warm, but then you can let go. You know, your fingers aren't stuck there, you can let go. And it does help you guide the thing a little bit, particularly when the rod is a bit long, a little bit flexible, and you're not quite sure where to put it. So that really helped me as well, just not being afraid to actually hold the rod. The other thing is, you get afraid the minute the spark jumps. So it jumps, you jump. There's a little bit of practice involved to getting over that jump reaction that you're naturally gonna have. The other thing is, when I first started trying this with the welding, I'm kind of welding like this because it's throwing off metal sparks, eh? But if you get into it, so what I mean is just get closer, then it's all so much easier. It's so much easier, it's ridiculous. And that's a fear reaction, because it is hot, it is sparking, there's electricity, it's kind of scary. And your reaction when you first do it is going to be like my reaction, and that is you're just afraid of it. And so it takes a little bit of time just to get over that fear of it. And just that act of being closer to the workpiece so that you can actually see what you're doing while you're doing it really makes a big difference. Now, I'm, as I've said, by no means an expert in this. All I'm really doing is sharing those early experiences I've had about what I've learned in a day or two of welding. I mean, you know, I'm not the world's greatest welder. There is an awful lot to learn. It is an excellent and tremendously practiced skill. But when I was watching the videos, I found that there weren't that many videos for that absolute beginner. The beginner like me, who's picked this up because they fancy giving it a go, and is faced with stupid problems like, how exactly do you strike an arc? Can you hold the thing? What about getting close to it? All those things have made a very big difference to the quality of what I've been able to weld. Let me give you a close-up of some of the welds that I've been making. So here's an example of some of the welds I've been making on this plate. This plate's 6mm thick. These are the first couple that I tried. This was the next one, and this was the fourth one. So you are looking at weld number 6, actually, because I did try a couple of other welds, but this is weld number 6 right here. So 3, 4, 5, it's my 6th weld. Now, if you look at that, you can see that little stacking that they call the stack of penny stuff just beginning to form there. As I say, I am by no means a welder, by no means. This is weld number 6 in my entire life, and I'm quite proud of that, actually. And that took me a couple of hours to get to that kind of stage, and a couple of hours was setting things up, cleaning things down. Here you can see the little practice spark welding when I was showing you how to strike that arc, or later how I strike that arc. And that's that practice there, and there is my actual weld right there, and I think that's actually very cool for an absolute beginner. So here's my effort at this thin steel. This thin steel is less than 1 millimeter thick, and you can see that what I've been doing is putting a blob, a blob, a blob, a blob, a blob, and then I've run some sections here and here to join those blobs together. That's absolute rubbish, okay? It really is absolute rubbish, but I'm still, this is my 3rd effort at welding a couple of bits of steel like this. Okay, so don't get me wrong, I'm not pretending to be a welder, okay? But I felt when I was watching these things, a lot of these guys who are good welders just missed on giving that information that's to do really with being afraid of stuff. So I thought it was valuable to share it, so that's what I wanted to share with you, that if you get over the fear of it, actually you can do it. And the main things are jumping back when the arc's forming the arc, so you're not thinking, hey, what am I doing wrong? Getting close to your work so you can see what it is you're doing, and of course all of that scary stuff, because we're talking high amps, lots of heat and lots of sparks everywhere. Now this arc welding with this stick welding, it's pretty aggressive apparently, and I can attest to that, it is pretty aggressive. And I had a look at thin sheet metal welding, and really what we think of as thin sheet metal and what a welder thinks of thin sheet metal are two different things. They go up to 3 millimeters thick, and they count that as sheet metal. Anything bigger they count as plate metal. To me, 3 millimeters thick is a hefty chunk of metal. But when you're going down to something of less than 1 millimeter, like you saw that stuff I was doing, it does tend to buckle and burn through. It's quite difficult to do, so I was practicing with that, and I'm really not there yet. It's going to take me a little bit more practice. And I was using sort of a sort of stitching way of doing it. So spot a weld, spot a weld, spot a weld, and then fill in the bits in between to prevent burning through. But again, this is just experience stuff that I'm experiencing and sharing with you as I learn to weld. It's not meant to be a welding tutorial. There's some great welding tutorials, but of course the guys who give welding tutorials are really good welders. So they've forgotten, really, or they don't see it as an issue about being afraid of the thing and jumping back and not getting close and all that sort of stuff. They don't see that as an issue. And their videos do tend to be full of all the information you need, you know, amp settings, metal that you're working with, rod thickness, that kind of stuff. So I think it's about giving it a go, learning as you go, and trying it, and not being afraid of trying it. Because it really does open up a world of possibilities. I mean, we obviously, like I say, we're making that gasifier unit, and for that I needed to learn to weld, as I've never done it before. But having such success, I'm obviously thinking of things like my own quad bike. I was planning on welding some scaff tube up together to make a quad bike. We can weld bolts on, we can make centres. There's just a ton of stuff we can do once we can weld. And getting to weld, it's the first step. It's about just getting over that fear of striking an arc. Anyway, I thought I would share that with you. I hope it was of interest, and thank you very much for watching.